Hey, it's Lawrence here, bringing you another episode on High Intensity Business. In this episode, I interview Luke Carlson. Luke is the founder and CEO of Discover Strength, a highly successful personal training business in Minnesota in the US. I love having Luke on the podcast, have him on all the time, as much as he will allow me to have him on the show. And in this episode, we focus on productivity. I absolutely love talking about this topic with Luke, as he's so obsessed, just as much as I am, with productivity and with optimizing his life and business. We start off by talking about the constraint. How do you identify the constraint in your business, the kink in the hose, the blocker, the thing that's stopping you from achieving your primary objectives, and how do you actually go about resolving that? And Luke gives some really good examples on that. We then talk about how to prioritize using a concept called the Big Three. We talk about how to manage overwhelm, something I've struggled with for the longest time in terms of getting to some of the lower level admin stuff that I perhaps mistakenly commit to, and just managing email and things like that. And again, Luke gives some really, really great advice on that. We talk about his diet, and we get into some really, really fine detail on how he manages his diet and the type of food that he eats on a daily basis, how he kind of thinks about the bigger picture in terms of days that he's going to eat well and days when he's going to cheat or not eat so well. It's just fascinating to learn about how he manages that particular area of his life. We then talk about training and workouts and how to incorporate workouts in your week so that you can kind of optimize for productivity, and maybe you're like me and you actually feel quite inspired and energized after a workout, and sometimes it's a good way to plan a workout before some kind of event to actually make you more productive. So we talk about that too. Please head on over to highintensitybusiness.com/tactics to get access to lots of free resources to help you grow your high intensity training business. Please remember to subscribe on your favorite platform so you always get updated every week when a new podcast is published. And without any further ado, please enjoy this podcast with Luke Carlson. Lawrence Snell here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com. This is episode 292, and today's topic is certainly one of my favorite topics, and I'm going to say it's probably one of Luke's favorite topics, is productivity. Today's guest is Luke Carlson. Luke is the founder and CEO of Discover Strength, a fast-growing personal training business in Minnesota. Discover Strength offer a variety of strength training sessions, including virtual personal training, facilitated by educated and expert trainers. Luke, welcome back to the podcast.
Lawrence, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So I've been really excited to talk to you about this. I know it was actually quite a while back. I reached out to you and said, Luke, we definitely should do a time management part 2, because we did obviously do a podcast on this topic before. And I think I was watching, I bought one of your rec trainings. I think it was the $1 Million Gym one. And in there you talked about the Big Three. And I thought, yeah, you know, it's a good time, I think, to address this topic and kind of get an update on you as to what's changed in terms of how you think about productivity and what you've changed in terms of your own systems. And the place I wanted to start was talking about the constraint. So this is something you taught me a long time ago. You said, you know what, one of the most productive things you can do in your business, if not the most productive thing, is focus on the constraint. Where's the kink in the hose that is stopping you from moving forward and growing your business? Maybe it's stopping you from achieving the most important rocks that quarter, and then ultimately your 1-year plan, for example. And you know, I think, encourage the listeners to go back and listen to part 1 about the definition of a constraint, although I think I've probably defined it a little bit there. But I'd love to hear, I want to talk to you about examples, if you're open to that, talking about the examples currently that you have in Discover Strength, because it just adds so much color to these things. And so in terms of the constraint, what is the constraint that you guys are focused on right now? Can you elaborate on that and how you're going about resolving that?
Yep. So I'm going to give you our current constraint, but I'll give you examples of a few previous constraints, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
So a constraint that we have right now, I think the biggest constraint is, for the longest time, we're moving into franchising. We spent 2 years investing a lot of money working with consultants, high price consultants, and developing a franchise. And that's the big plan, right? We have goals around it. So constraint is usually the barrier, the blockage that's preventing you from achieving those goals or starting to really run toward those goals. Well, for us with franchising, the biggest constraint is that we were not We were not registered in the state of Minnesota. We were registered in 49 states. We were able to sell franchises in 49 other states, but not Minnesota. And our objective was to sell franchises in Minnesota first. So the constraint there was a constraint where we couldn't do anything about it. We just had to wait. So it's a unique situation where there's really nothing you do. You just wait. So that's an example of a constraint. Now our constraint, all right, for us to do the sales process, we are bringing people in for a discovery day. Discovery day is the final step of the sales process. They've been through a number of different webinars and phone calls and read different documents and signed NDAs. And it culminates with a discovery day where they come in and spend a full day with us. They have the dinner the night before, and then we meet with them from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. and walk through every aspect of the offering. Well, we do this at the new corporate office, and part of it is we're going to show them the studio downstairs. So we built a new studio, we built a new corporate office, all with the idea that this is going to be a part of the franchise sales process. And so we want to take them through a workout in the new studio, but we also want them to see the interior design and the look and the exact equipment and everything of that studio. And then we'll spend most of the day in the corporate office. Well, until that's all done, we felt like we don't have a great opportunity. We don't have the same chance, the same odds at awarding franchises and having it go really well. So the constraint right now is hurry up and complete the corporate office build out, and hurry up and complete the studio build out, because we literally have franchisees, potential franchisees, that are saying, well, I don't want to schedule my discovery day till all that's done, because I want to see what the new studio is going to look like. So that's a constraint for us, is we got to get that done so we can start selling and awarding franchises, which is a key part of what we're trying to do. And I have like revenue goals for fourth quarter of 2020 that are really involved with selling franchises. Now, let me give you another constraint. So this is the next constraint that's going to be on our horizon. We have in 2021, we're going to have aggressive goals on how many franchises we award. Well, right now, our franchisees, about 80% of the equipment comes from one manufacturer. And everyone listening could guess who that manufacturer is. Well, that manufacturer has an inability to produce equipment and ship that equipment quickly. So there's two different issues there. One, production. Can they actually manufacture it on time and in a reasonable time frame? And two, can they actually ship it? So let's take number two first. They have one human. Everyone that's listening to your podcast in the US knows who that one human is that delivers all of this equipment. So right away, you don't have to study the theory of constraints from Eli Goldratt, the guy that created the theory of constraints. You don't have to study that to understand, hold on, you have one guy in one truck that's delivering all the equipment across the entire United States of America. That's a constraint right there. You have to wait for him to be ready to deliver your equipment. That's not going to work. And so we're trying to blow up that constraint. So one of the things we're talking about is, should we, and we've been working with this particular equipment manufacturer based in Ocala, Florida, where we would fly one of our people down there and just learn and study their whole process so that they understand how to assemble and disassemble a machine and know the equipment inside and out, so that we can either buy a truck, we can buy trucks, or we can rent trucks, and so that we can deliver the equipment to our franchisees ourselves. So that would be taking that constraint of the delivery of equipment, and then we would own it. All right. Now, the second constraint I had mentioned is the manufacturing of equipment. If they can't manufacture the equipment fast enough, then we need a different vendor for equipment. So we're looking at, do we need to go to China, and do we need to have the equipment produced in China where we can expedite it and it can cost less money, et cetera. So those are two of the biggest constraints that I'm already forecasting for 2021 that I can't help but daydream about how we're going to blow up those constraints. The constraint right now is finish the corporate office, finish the studio, so we can start doing our sales process, because if we don't start selling a few franchises, then the rest of this just doesn't matter, right? But as soon as we get into selling more franchises, if I told our equipment supplier right now that we have 10 franchisees that are ready to buy in 1 month, it wouldn't work. And so like we literally have a constraint, and that's such a fascinating constraint, because that equipment manufacturer should want 10 orders of brand new equipment, right? That'd be the most revenue that they've had in in a 7, 8, 9 year period, is my estimate. And we want it also, right? We want to award 10 franchises. So
Are we
those are a
allowed?
couple of the.
Why are we
Go
being
ahead.
so secretive about the name of
Oh,
the
yeah,
company?
it doesn't. I didn't know if anybody cares or not. That's Medix, and that's
Yeah.
Medix's issue right now. Yeah, we don't need to be secretive.
Just because there will be some people that listen to this who are like, who the hell is Luke talking about? Like if they're like new
Yeah.
listeners, for example. But no, I guess that. That's super interesting. It sounds to me like it's almost a bit like a chicken and the egg issue, right? Because you want to make sales, franchise sales to justify it. But then obviously after a certain number, you can't deliver on the demand. So it's like you still need to generate a few sales up front before you can really pursue that seriously. Am I right? In terms of
Yeah,
change.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Now that's not the nature of all constraints. Some
Yeah.
constraints are, I would say, if one of our previous constraints was if we don't get the general managers, that's like the manager of our studio, if we don't get their comp plan figured out, we are not going to be able to grow. Okay, so that's the constraint. How much revenue do they need to produce themselves? How much time should they be spent in what we would call LMA? That's a Gino Wickman. LMA is lead, manage, hold people accountable. How much are they managing? How much revenue are they producing? If we don't, and how does it impact the gross margin of that studio? If we don't figure that out, we can't grow. That's the constraint. So you can spot constraints from things that aren't working, that if this did work, you'd be able to sprint towards your goal. Your constraint is not your goal, right? The constraint is what's keeping you from moving quickly toward the goal. What are you butted up against, and what do you really have to confront and figure out? So I've mentioned this before, I think on the podcast with you, Lawrence, is constraint for so many studios is how do we retain employees? How do we retain trainers? So until you figure out how you recruit and train trainers, recruit, onboard, train, retain, compensate trainers, forget everything else. I mean, do not think about marketing unless you can figure that out. Don't think about anything else so you can figure that problem out.
Yeah, and just on that, people are going to be thinking, "Well, shit, I need to figure that stuff out." So, Luke has very generously contributed 2 podcasts on the public show, exactly how to do that in terms of attracting and retaining talent. So, I would check those out. You can go to highintensitybusiness.com and just search Luke's name, and those will come up. There's a lot from Luke, so you might have to sift through 1 or 2 pages, but you'll see it there. No, that's awesome, Luke. I appreciate that. One thing I was going to ask you about is back in 2017, because I was listening to one of the older episodes we did, the main constraint was the app. And I just wondered what happened to the app, because I know we've been back and forth on email a little bit because I was curious like what you were doing there, because there's one individual I know, and I think you might know them too, who looks like they're making great progress in terms of really nailing a high intensity training app for trainers and for home use. But I'm just curious what happened with that constraint and where you're at now with all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Great question. So there's really 2 questions there, Lawrence. What happened with the app, and what happened with the app as a constraint? And so right now we would say the app is not a constraint, because we can continue to grow the revenue in our current locations. We can continue to open corporate locations, like our own locations, which we are. We're going to open up 2 locations in this month. And we can award franchises without the app at all. So it's not a constraint for us. Now, if you ask the question, what happened to the app? The current answer is we've wasted $150,000 and we have nothing. We launched it since you re-recorded that podcast. We did a launch about 1.5 years ago, used the app for about a month, and then everything crashed, and we're now at ground zero, and nothing's really usable. And we're at a decision point: is will we still invest money into that app with that developer? That's number one. Number two, will we use this developer in the Netherlands that you're talking about? And we have a call with them. I have a call with them every 2 weeks. I had a call with them a couple days ago. We're testing that nonstop with our own workouts. And then we have an app developer that we've been talking with for the last 3 years that's massive, that are integrated with MindBody, which is what we use for scheduling and point of sale and virtually the entire business management system. And it's a really robust system, and they want to build it around us and our needs. And so they have just great capacity and capabilities. And so those are kind of our options right now. So I think we are going to not have an internal app and have this internal technology that we build, I think we're going to use somebody else's technology. And that's what we're trying to sort through right now. But we are very clear as a company, it is not a constraint. So because it's not a constraint, it probably doesn't turn into a rock or a big focus for us. Like David had a call with me yesterday on this company that wants to, they rolled out with Equinox, which is a huge health club company in the US. And they want us to be like their major partner to move this forward. And they've been kind of courting us, and we've been talking with them for exactly 3 years now. And I think they're really bright, and they've built something really, really great, really impressive. But I would always remind David, this is not the constraint right now. You cannot drop other things and focus on this, because this is not the barrier to us getting to where we need to go. It's really interesting. It's shiny. Eventually we need to do it. We need to make a decision on it, but it's not the constraint right now. So 3 years ago when we recorded, or 3.5 years ago when we recorded Lawrence, we definitely viewed it as the constraint. And now I just don't think it's the constraint. But it's only a matter of time where it becomes the constraint, right? If we're on clipboards and pencils and papers, and we have 50 franchises across the country, I think that's a weakness in our model, and we need to improve it. Right now, it's not a constraint.
I was thinking, one of the best times or ways in which to identify the constraint and then get to work on resolving it is with clarity breaks, right? Something that you're an enormous fan of. And I know you schedule those on a repeated basis, where you sit down with a pad and paper in your favorite location or a very relaxing location, really just focus on doing some real hard thinking. And I think this is something that's so undervalued in business. People are, trainers are so, or owners and operators are so busy. And I get it, they're training people, are trying to run their business, but they don't always see a clarity break as a productive activity, when actually I think in today's world, hard thinking is so undervalued and so productive if we can have the discipline to do it. And I know you and I have both been binging Richard Koch lately on a bit, maybe only myself binging it. I know you've been obviously listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast with Richard Koch lately, and just really enjoyed listening to him speak about all things, 80-20 and productivity and investing and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, so would you agree with that? Do you think a clarity break is a great way in which to really tackle these constraints in the business?
Yeah, and I actually think there's brilliance in what you said, and that people maybe struggle with the idea of what to do in a clarity break. Great, I sit down with a notebook, by a fireplace and a comfortable chair and start thinking. Where would I even start thinking? Well, I think you have to have the right questions, like the seed questions, to go into a clarity break. And one of those seed questions can be, what is the constraint? And ask it of yourself. But if you ask it of any of your team, that is going to give you really valuable insight, right? So I love asking all of our managers, what's the number one barrier that your location is facing, constraint your location's facing, or what do you think the number one barrier the company is facing? Because they may have very different answers than you. And that will be a way to smoke out some issues that need to be worked on. And maybe you find out, this is the constraint that I really need to be working on. So the question, like, what's the major constraint, is a great framing question to lead into a clarity break to really think about. And then you can go to work on it. I think our problem is not that we're not really intelligent, deep thinkers. It's that we are constantly thinking about the fires, and a constraint is very different than a fire. And fires are important. Like a fire to me is like everything with COVID as we record this is, okay, what's our current protocol for if a client lets us know that they have COVID, and a trainer worked with that person 8 days ago, but the positive test for COVID was 2 days ago. Do we have the trainer get to, right? That's a fire, and that's where we spend all of our mental energy right now. And there's something there's always fires, right? And that distracts us from actually doing the thinking to determine what a constraint is. And a constraint is not the only thing you think about in a clarity break, but it's definitely one of them. You should always know what your constraint is.
And I guess the trick is to always have systems to deal with those fires, right? Which is difficult during COVID, because almost you have to create new systems. Like with that, I'm just curious what your approach is with, say, COVID. Like, do you kind of think, it's a difficult question, but do you think where COVID, depending on how how long term it is, you sometimes think, well, do we really need to build a system for dealing with fires and COVID, or can we deal with them ad hoc? Like, I wonder. I'm curious what the kind of conditional logic is in Discover Strength, like how you decide whether something's going to be you're going to start systematizing something or just deal with it ad hoc. And I think COVID's probably a good example.
Yeah. So we're going to systematize it, but it's not going to be elaborate. It's going to be, and we just had the discussion yesterday. So if a client tells us that they've tested positive for COVID, and the trainers work with them, how many days back do they have to actually have worked together in order for us to tell the trainer that they should get a COVID test? And then what do we do with their schedule in the meantime? So COVID test, if the turnaround is 2 days and they have a full slate of clients the next day, what do we do with that slate of clients? That is like the whole system. Like, how are we dealing with those things? This is not 6 pages and putting in your operations manual or your core process. It's a pretty simple system of how we're moving this forward. And then we can just communicate it across all of our locations. So I think part of managing is constantly putting out fires. The key point to this whole discussion is, if all you're doing is putting out fires, you're missing out on massive opportunity. Like, you should not have a business where there's not fires anymore. One of my favorite health club consultants, a guy by the name of Thomas Plummer, says, do not root for the day where you go into work, you go into your gym, and everything goes right. Stop rooting for that day. And that's what we do. We say, man, can't there just be a day where my staff don't have any issues and we have no concerns with all of our members and our customers? That's what I'm hoping for. He's like, don't hope for that, because that's not the business that you're actually in. You're in the business of all these different issues and fires, and it's your ability to handle them with grace. And Winston Churchillism is what? To run from one problem to the next, or one setback or one failure to the next, with great enthusiasm and excitement and optimism, right? That's literally what we should be doing. So there should be fires. We just need to also set aside time where we're thinking about things like constraints and maybe bigger strategic issues.
So,
And then that Lawrence probably gets
Go ahead.
to, I'm sorry. No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No,
I was just going to say that gets back to the really popular topic now. Gary Vaynerchuk has maybe popularized it, but he is not the first person to talk about it, of self-awareness, right? He says self-awareness is the greatest strength that you can have as an entrepreneur. Well, if self-awareness is your ability to look at yourself and your business and say, what's the biggest constraint, and actually get the answer to that right, that is really powerful. I mean, I have empathy for the entrepreneur. They can't look at their operation and say, this is what's broken, or this is the constraint that we have to go to work on. Man, if you have that skill, the ability to identify what a constraint is or what the problems are, that is so incredibly powerful. And I think I know too many entrepreneurs in different industries that I'm looking at them and I'm like, you have a massive constraint staring you in the eye and you are completely oblivious to it. That's not the situation we want to find ourselves in, right? We want to have that self-awareness.
Well, have you pointed that out to that those individuals before?
No, I mean, it's not just pointing it out to them. It's, you have to actually have to be able to convince them of it, right? Because they almost don't even believe that. That's how poor their self-awareness is.
Okay, got it. I wanted to talk about the big three, which is a strategy that you talked about again in one of your recent rec courses, which I quite like. And it's something you also talked about in our original productivity podcast, where you said, you know, when you journal in the morning, you're like, oh, what are the big three things that I need to do today to move the business forward? What are the three things that are going to help us achieve our rocks for the quarter and, like, you know, execute on my role in the business successfully, that kind of thing. And it's always interested me, this concept, because I'm more of a big one, but I'm just curious, do you still use the big three and do you still book the 90 minutes every day for it?
So this right here is called, the product is called the Full Focus Planner. And I know this is a podcast and I can see you and listeners can't, but I just flashed my Full Focus Planner to Lawrence.
Well, they'll see if they're on YouTube or Facebook.
Okay, great. So I've used the Full Focus Planner created by Michael Hyatt for 1 full year, or I should say 3 quarters right now. I'm entering the 4th quarter of it. It's a planner that's designed to be used for 1 full quarter. You don't have to buy it. I like to buy it, or I buy it because I like the tool, but you could still use the tool without buying it. So here's the idea. Everybody has a to-do list. And I was notorious for having notebooks of to-do lists each day. And I would have the date on top and I'd write everything I have to do. And how do you attack your to-do list? You generally attack the things that you're the most excited about doing, that are the easiest, that are maybe the most urgent, that pop up in your email inbox, and you're responsive to those things. So you end a day, you had 22 items on your to-do list and you got 14 of them done. If one of your strengths in a strength finder assessment is achiever, you feel pretty darn good about that day because you got 14 things done. And I lived multiple years of my entrepreneurial life feeling good about getting 14 things done or 18 things done. But the question is, did you actually get the most important things done to move the organization forward? Another way to frame that up is, did you spend your time and energy that day on the most important things that actually move the organization forward? So I've read Getting Things Done. And after listening to your podcast with the people from The Perfect Workout and being so inspired by Kyle, I reread it and I can't do it. Maybe 5 years from now, I'll reread it and can recommit to it, but I can't do it. So Michael Hyatt's system of productivity management and priority management is a system that I use rather than Getting Things Done. I think it's just so much simpler. And I don't want to, I have so much respect for Matt and Kyle. They're just on the next level in terms of how they look at their productivity. This is really working for me right now, and I go all into it. And by the way, there's a full-on podcast just on how to use this planner better. It's called Focus on This. So you can really go deep on how to use that system. And the system is still pretty simple. So instead of having the to-do list of all the things you do, you pick the 3 most important things that you need to do. And so the framing question is, what are the most important 3 things that I need to do that would move me toward my stated goal? And for me, stated goal is always the organization's stated goal, but you could frame it as the 3 most important things I need to do today to move me toward my personal or professional goals. So I frame it up as just as professional, but you could definitely do personal as well. And then underneath that, there's a space for all the other to-dos that you have to do, all the other things on your list. So like I flip open today, I have the 3 big things, then I have a whole heck of other things. So what's the discipline? The discipline is when you sit down in your computer and you start working in your white space, don't start on the rest of your to-do list. You only go to work on those big 3, and not until those big 3 are done can you focus on the other things. And where does this come from, Lawrence? This goes all the way back to the late 1800s and the productivity consultant Ivy Lee. Ivy Lee calls on Charles Schwab, right? Charles Schwab, not the financial Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab is the president of the largest steel company in the world. And Ivy Lee says, I'm a consultant. I'm going to help you guys be more productive. I think you've heard this story before, right? Mm-hmm. And Charles Schwab basically throws Ivy Lee out of his office and says, we don't need any new ideas around here. And as Ivy Lee is getting tossed out of his office, Charles Schwab says, just wait. If you could actually help us get more done and become more productive, I'd pay you whatever it's worth. And that's where Ivy Lee introduces his idea. He says, before you go to bed tonight, write down, he says 5, write down the 5 most important things you need to do tomorrow. When you start on your work tomorrow, look at number 1 and focus entirely on number 1 and ignore number 2 until number 1 is done. When you're done with number 1, go on to number 2 and work through that order. Teach this to all of your managers, have them teach it to their managers, and you let me know what it's worth to you. And as the story goes, 6 months later, he gets a check for, what today would be like $400,000, because Charles Schwab said this changed the productivity of our entire organization. Is we actually focused on priorities. And I don't know if you have to do it exactly like that, but now I define a great day as, did I do my big 3? So I have a journal, a 5-minute journal, and the 5-minute journal at the end of the day, it asks the question, 3 amazing things that happened today. And every single day, if I complete my big 3, I write, I completed my big 3. And I'll often write, I completed my big 3 despite that it was midnight. I completed my big 3 despite the fact that I was in a meeting all day long. I still made time to get my big 3 done. Mm-hmm. I would also say that when you plan your big 3, be mindful of what your day looks like. So I'm with you in a day today, Lawrence, where I'm in a meeting or a commitment from 6:30 a.m. until 9 p.m. I have a commitment solid. I have 1 hour gap in there, and that's it. And so I know that my big three, I still need to pick the three most important things I can do to move the organization forward, but they better be, they can't be too meaty, right? I have 1 hour to get them done. So I know exactly what the three things. One of them is a key email I need to send. One of them is a piece of content I need to write. So I'll get those things done in that 1 hour period. Where there's another day, Lawrence, where I just got off the phone with David, our VP of operations. He has a day of complete white space today. And so his big three today are going to be massive. He might work on one of them for 6 hours, part of his rock. And so every day is going to be different in terms of how big those big three should be. And I know I just went on the longest tangent ever there. So
No,
I'll let
I
you,
wanted you to
I'll let you
elaborate.
refocus. Okay.
I wanted you to elaborate on what the big three look like, because I think that was my concern. I was like, how can you do three really challenging activities? But then you just explained there, sometimes they might just be like a really key email. And this is actually a really important distinction, is sometimes an action can be highly effective, but actually be very, very low effort. Like a key email might be, result in a significant amount of revenue. Let's assume that key email, Luke, is a franchise sale, right? And it might only take you 15 minutes because maybe you know exactly what you're going to say, and maybe you've even got a template, knowing you, right? So like, not that you have email templates that you send me or anything like that. But no, that makes it a lot clearer to me. In fact, again, all these principles, you hear it's, how do I say this? You hear this stuff being talked about in different ways, but the principles are all very, very much the same or very similar. So, I've heard Tim Ferriss say a similar kind of thing where you write down a whole list of things and then you ask yourself the questions: if I did this today, would it make everything else irrelevant or unimportant? And I think the other question is, would I be happy with my day if this is all I achieved? Something along those lines. And then you write down yes or no for every single one, and you might have a few that are yes, yes, and you separate those, and then you just go to work on one of them. You might have, say, 4, and you go to work on one of them, but it's the same principle, right? Same concept. And like we talked about this before, after you introduced me to Traction EOS, I started saying to you, Luke, I'm seeing like EOS best practice everywhere I look now, because all these ideas are interconnected, and all you're doing is really becoming even more knowledgeable about these principles and how to implement them. So no, that's really interesting. So do you still do the 90-minute space in the diary for the big three? Do you still have your assistant plan that, or has that changed for you?
Yeah, I don't anymore, because I now just plan my big three for whatever white space I have or whatever the day looks like. So it's going to be bigger or smaller relative to the space that I actually have. So as I talk to you right now, we talked about this as we started. I'm about 2.5 hours north of where I live. So once a quarter, I do a little getaway where I drive to one of my favorite spots. It's called Canal Park Lodge. And I will come here for a full day or day and a half and work on some big projects. So yesterday I had a lot of white space where I could really do focused work and work on one of my big rocks. So yesterday, one of my big threes was to spend a significant amount of time working on that rock. So that's another probably really key point, is where should your big three come from? Well, you need to know what your quarterly priorities are, because a big three is often going to come from those quarterly priorities. And then I think you do just a very simple weekly preview to be able to come up with it. So on Sundays, I do a weekly preview for the whole week. Again, this is the methodology taught by Michael Hyatt. It is not complicated. It is not elaborate, where you just say, what are the 3 most important things I need to accomplish for this upcoming week? And then you have another list of all the different professional things you have going on that week that you need to get to. So I have a list of the 3 most important things I need to do that week. And then I have a list of all the things that I think need to get done this week. And by the way, things emerge, right? I do that on Sunday. By Monday and Tuesday, there's like 6 other things that have emerged that are pretty darn important. But when I plan my big 3 for that day, I look back at that list. What do I need to do this week? What were the big 3 for this week? And then what's that whole litany of things for this week? I can pull from those and create them as my big 3. And
And
the other, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry, Lawrence.
No, you
I
go,
was going
you
to say
go.
the other thing that I'll use in my big three is sometimes there's something that I've been avoiding doing. It's not that important, but I'll put it on my to-do list every day for 3 weeks straight and never do it because it's not the big three, and I just don't want to do it. But at some point, it's got to get done. So by making it one of my big three, it'll get done. I have one of those today. I have to prep a workout card, a virtual workout card for this client. She was a longtime client when she lived in Minnesota, and she has lived in Arizona for a few years. And she's going to train with me twice a week. She's going to be like I only train two people virtually, and she's going to be one of them. And I have to prepare her workout card. And so I don't want to do that. I just want to jump on the virtual workout and just train her and give her a great workout. But I have to follow the process and have to record everything and have to make sure it's in the Google Sheet correctly. And frankly, I do it so infrequently, I forget how to do it. So I told David, hey, I have this as one of my big three. I'm probably going to call you and ask you how to use the Google Sheet today, which is embarrassing to admit. But I got to do that today because I'm going to train her twice a week going forward. And if I don't get it done today, it's just going to be miserable for me. So is it really the most important thing to move the organization forward? Heck no. But every once in a while, you can elevate something to your big three to make sure that you actually get it done.
Yeah, this is something I really struggle with. My next question for you was about how to deal with low level admin pileup and anxiety. Because my issue right now, Luke, is I'm definitely, you'd be very ashamed of me. Following traction, I've got items on my to-do list that have been there way too long. And I'm having to really just highlight the ones in green that really priority items that are going to achieve my rocks, right? Which is how we should be doing it. But I'm just finding, I think that's my challenge. And it's one of the reasons why I had, Skylar and Kyle on the podcast, talk about productivity and getting things done. I had obviously Matt on to talk about that. I had David Allen himself on back in the day to talk about getting
Mm-hmm.
things done. To which his kind of response to a lot of my challenges was, "Come on, Lawrence, get it together." But yeah, it's still something I struggle with. Is I guess overwhelm, and I think part of the solution for that is one, I'm getting better at saying no. I think it's really important to say no because now that I guess I'm having more traction in my business, I am getting more opportunities, and I just have to say no to like 99.9% because unless they're aligned with the priorities I have, they're just distractions, right? And they dilute your focus. Do you say no a lot, Luke? I'm just curious. Like, do you find yourself saying no a lot?
I need help in saying no.
Okay.
So, like I have a really wonderful executive assistant who is good at getting me to say no. I mean, or she'll say no for me, or she'll say, "Luke, you said yes to that. That's not aligned with your schedule, your priorities, etc." And so I struggle with it because what happens, Lawrence, and you're dealing with this right now, is the stuff you're saying no to is stuff that you like doing and maybe you're good at and you get a rush from. And so you want to say yes to it and you want to be helpful. And it's, I think it's hard to say no because those things are, they're enticing, right? You get a hit of dopamine from being involved in a lot of those things. So I struggle with saying no, and I'm getting better at saying no. And what I always try to do is I try to fast forward to a week from now or a few days from now when I'm not in such a positive mood. And I feel like I'm looking at my calendar and I wake up in the morning and I want to call Heather and be like, how did you think this was a good idea, Heather? How did you think it was a good idea that I'm booked from 4:30 a.m. okay until 9 p.m. with no second to even go to the bathroom? And I know I'm going to get there eventually. Like mentally, I'm going to get there and be upset about it. And so how can I say no to something right now so I don't get into that position? And so I've been asked things like, I've been asked to like, would you mentor me? And this is what the mentorship would look like. And I love that idea. I mean, if you told me when I was 20 years old, someone would ask me to mentor them, spend time with them, that sounds like about the most rewarding, coolest thing that I could ever dream of. Well, I also know that I need to say no to it because that mentee, I'm going to let them down. because I'm not going to be mentally all in with them. I'm not going to be able to spend enough time with them. And then they're going to get done with any type of mentorship with me and be like, that guy actually was not as special as I thought. And that was not a very meaningful interaction. And I can see what's going to happen, right? So I want to avoid it. Rather than put the pressure on myself to actually step up and do it well, just say I'm not going to do it well. So I just can't do it at all.
Yeah, I think that I really appreciate that, and I fully agree. I will
And
even
you,
say, go
I'm
on.
sorry, Lawrence, I just get excited. You go ahead. I want you to go this time.
So I just think even when you do it, you say it to me, like, for those listening, I make requests of Luke quite a lot, and sometimes I chance my arm and to see if he'll go for it. And and I like the way you say no to me. You're always very polite. And I also think, it's kind of a testament. It's almost like a litmus test for those in your network. It's like, well, because I've said no to people and they've, not reacted very well to that. And then all that makes me think is, well, I'm definitely not going to say yes in the future, So I sometimes think that it's interesting. It's an interesting test when you do say no to see how the other person responds, and how good your relationship is as well. So that's just a side thought, really.
Yeah, two key things there. I'm really related to that is I don't want to give the impression that you can only say yes to things that are absolutely going to move you toward your stated goal, right? Like you can say yes to things that you're just interested in and passionate about, but you always have to be clear on how you want to be spending your time. So I think one of the most influential books I've ever read, I read in January. No, it was February or March. We were maybe even to lockdown. It was maybe March. It's Donald Miller, and it's called A Million Miles in a Thousand Years. And it's basically it's a memoir, but it will change your life. It's about like, hey, you are the author of the story about your life. You should probably write a better story. And so you got to take a step back and think about what kind of story am I writing here? And so you better do things that are interesting. I was in a board meeting yesterday for the International Health Club Association. And one of the guys on the board pinged me and said, hey, did you get my email? Are you in? And I thought, I didn't get an email from you. What are you talking about? And he sends me over a trail run. So there's a 17-mile option and a 26-mile option, a full marathon, through the mountains and trails in Arkansas. And literally the warning on the website says, if you've never done a trail race before, do not do this trail race, because the chances of being incapacitated, lost, or injured without a chance of rescue are very high. And I thought, wow, this sounds incredible. So I'm going to fly to Arkansas in the beginning of January and hang out with him and do this run. Now, is that linked to my stated goals for 2021? Well, no, it's not at all. But is it part of what I want my life to be about? Yeah. So I'm allowed to include it. Now, when you talked about saying no to people that ask you for things, I think when you say no, and you often say yes, I think, so sometimes you're saying yes, sometimes you're saying no. I think it teaches the people that ask things of you to be selective and continue to ask the right things where you can provide the most value. And I think that you're going to continue to get things that come your way that are more suited to your sweet spot and things you're passionate about and things you're interested in. So I think they're more respectful of asking you for the right things. And the other thing is Lawrence, that I feel this way, is I have an abundance mentality, and I just don't want to go through life, only thinking about, does it help me reach my stated goals? Because ultimately, every time I say yes to something, man, it just opens up more opportunities for me and, new learnings for me. And so I just, sometimes I think you do have to say yes, and great things come about it. And you have to be reflective and say, this is how I'm spending my time. These are the things I've said yes to. Has this been fruitful? Has it led to other opportunities? Has it led to other growth in my business or in my life? And for me, the answer has always been yes. So many great things happen from saying yes to these things. So it's you have to weigh and consider that as well.
Yeah. I like the distinction you made between saying yes to something that is going to bring you a lot of joy. And I think part of it is about discerning the difference between that and something that you're like really up for in the moment, but your future self won't be up for, right? that's kind of, I think that's almost like you have to practice that and get better at that. And then you become more attuned to, okay, yeah, that sounds like something that'd be cool now, but I know in 2 weeks I'll just be like, no, I don't want to do that, and say no. And you're better off probably saying no to that at that point.
You just said it so perfectly. Your future self. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, would my future self be like, Luke, what are you thinking? Why did you do this? Why'd you say yes to this?
Yeah.
It's just easy for you to respond to that email quickly and say, yep, I'll do it. Let's schedule it. And yeah, future self is not happy with that.
Like a podcast with Lawrence Neal, for example. I hope not. so I just wanted to jump back because I'm really curious on some advice from you. Actually, going back to the low level admin. The stuff that is maybe it's important but not urgent, right? Maybe it's important later. Maybe I'm one of these people. If I make a commitment, no matter how small, I feel so awful if I don't follow through with it. Right? I really think, and that's integrity. And if you don't have that, what do you have? Right? And one example. I'll give you a real world example we can talk about. So, I have a client I'm working with virtually for virtual training, and he's also a data analyst, and he's a total wizard with spreadsheets. And I was talking to him about, we're going to be building some kind of more advanced Google Sheet for tracking virtuals and studio training in our studio here in Galway. And we might be using a Google Sheet or an app. We're not quite sure. And he said, look, I can build you something. It's child's play for me because he does really advanced, data analytics with spreadsheets. So, the stuff I sort of described to him in terms of, tracking workouts was very simplistic for him. And then, I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. So then we had a separate call and we talked through what might need to happen, what he needs from me. And then I sort of said, yeah, that's great. And I'll provide all those things you need. And one of those things was to provide him with a detailed exercise menu, which, to be fair, is something I do need to do complete anyway. But without keeping a long story short, in the terms of the list of all my priorities right now, this is like way down the bottom. I mean, we really don't need a really fancy spreadsheet or app right now. We just actually, what's more important is continuing using what we currently use and generate more clients in a nutshell. And I've had this item on my calendar and just gets shifted to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. And I've actually decided, I don't think Tulu will listen. I don't think he listens to my show. So not that it matters if he does. I'm actually going to email him today and just say, look, this is where this is in my priority list. Let's just park it. Don't do any work yourself and wait for me to come back to him. So maybe just talking that out to you there is like helped me solve that. But I'm just curious, like, do you personally have a long list of to-dos or emails or quote unquote admin that does pile up, and how do you personally manage that?
I love how you just solved that specific issue that you have. I think that's a great approach, and just having clear communication on it. For me, it's I'm going to restate what I said. It's never one of my big three, but it's in that list below that. And I'm still going to try to work on that list. So when the big three's done, I'm going to try to work through the rest of that admin list. And then I'm also going to try to delegate any of that admin list that I can. So before I even put it on the list, I might have somebody else do it. So there's maybe somebody else in the company that should be doing it as actual work, or Heather, my assistant, should be doing it. And we've gotten really good on that. Like right now, that those are personal and professional things. Like, I don't book a restaurant reservation. She will always do that. I don't book, like, I have a massage tonight at 8 p.m. She books that. She books a haircut for me. She books any appointment that I would have. Literally my dentist appointments, she books. Now, you may say that's silly, but I like to have everything scheduled. And that's, if it's 5 minutes scheduling one of those things, all of that adds up. So then there's a lot of to-dos also. So like we have a new corporate office. The building is beautiful, and there's these outdoor deck spaces, and we wanted to host a meeting on the outdoor deck space so people could be outdoors and socially distanced, and we were going to have like 45 people there. And I said, Heather, can you book this? So she knows who to talk to. She knows what questions to ask. She can figure all of it out. And that's an important admin step. And I get excited about that. I know who the woman is that I wanted. Her name's Jordan. I wanted to reach out to her and say, oh, we have this vision for the meeting. We want to do it outside. We want to have the doors open. So it's part inside and outside. And we'll have a projector screen up and do PowerPoint, and it'll overlook Excelsior Avenue. And this will be, I didn't do any of it. And Heather just ran with it. So you got to delegate some of those things.
Yeah.
And then lastly, it goes back to the question, and this is the age old question. What do you want to be known for? And one of the things I want to be known for is I can follow through on commitments. And in terms of communication, if someone asks of something of me, I will respond to them quickly. And the person that modeled this to me is Joe Cirilli, who Joe Cirilli is the legendary founder and owner of the Gainesville Health and Fitness Center. And every time I email him or text message him, he always responds to me with either action or a thank you or a reply. He gets back to every communication. And I'm thinking, this guy's got 600 employees and he's got a busy life. He has people constantly. The guy does not fall behind on his email, his text messages, his communication. And he modeled that to me when I was like 22, 23 years old, bothering him. And I thought, well, I'm going to be the same way. I want to stay on top of those things. And I can't believe how many people operate businesses where you ask something simple of them, or you maybe even are offering them something of value, and they don't even get back to you. Like the inability to manage admin and emails and text messages is an Achilles heel for so many entrepreneurs. And I think it's important, not because those items are the most important thing you're going to do that day, but because what do you want to be known for? How do you want to be perceived by colleagues and friends? Do you want to be perceived as someone who can close the loop and respond to your communications and deliver on a promise? And you might even just say, you might just respond to the email and say, I can't do this, but at least you've responded, right? There's nothing worse. I mean, I talk to Hannah every single, week about someone with our rec conference or some other event that we're doing in all different, like in our space and other spaces. And we say, hey, we've got to email out to this person. We haven't heard back from them. Or Hannah will say, hey, I've emailed them 4 times. I've text messaged them twice. I've direct messaged them on Instagram and on Facebook and haven't heard anything back. And to me, it's like my opinion of that person maybe drops 5% because I'm like, how can you not communicate? Because what we're talking about here is something that's going to benefit you massively. Like, we're working harder on this for your benefit than you are. And I don't want to show up that way. I want to be someone that can actually manage my communications and my commitments.
I fully agree with that. And I think that's part of my problem. It's like make too many tiny commitments. If people listening to this are struggling with organization managing email, I really recommend you use either Boomerang for email, which enables you to send an email, and then if they reply or don't reply, you can set conditions. It will ping it back to you within a set time frame. So it could be a day, 2 days, 1 week, 1 month. I find that so useful for tracking communications. You can just send it and then not have to think about it. I think, in fact, Google or Gmail might have something inbuilt now that does that automatically. But what do you use, Luke, for stuff like that? Or do you not?
I don't have anything sophisticated like that. No.
Okay. Personally, I find that really helpful. And so that can help, because I agree with you, Luke. It's like, it's those simple things, right? Do what you say you're going to do. Have the courtesy to say thanks. Think about how you want to be remembered. Like, that stuff is like, I can't remember where I heard this, but it's like when you kick the bucket, right? And you're dead. The things people remember you for aren't necessarily your achievements. It's your reputation, right? It's who you were. And that's really, really struck a chord with me. It really made me think, you know what, like, I need to be making sure that I'm living core values and putting that above business success. You know what I mean? So, and
you're so right. That's so brilliant. But if you don't want to be that esoteric or that, if you don't want to take that vantage point, Lawrence, you could also just take a couple steps back and say, the people that I'm interacting with and that I'm maybe letting down, or I don't respond to the email, or I don't come through for them, a year from now, this happens to me all the time, I'm going to need something from them. And before I reach out to them right away, I go through my memory bank and I think, have I responded to them, the last time they reached out to me? Do I have things that I haven't, loose ends that I haven't tied up with my interactions with them. Because if that's the case, I'm hesitant to even reach out to them because I haven't come through for them. And so I want to make sure I've come through for everybody so that when it's my turn to ask them for something, which I am going to ask them for something, I'm going to say, I need you to do this. I want a track record of doing things for them. James Fisher recently reached out to me and said, hey, big thing I need you to do for me. And if it's too big, let me know. And it's a pretty big thing. And I looked at it and I said, we can do it. And I turned to Hannah and I said, guess what? I got a big thing for us from James Fisher that you're going to have to do. And right away, she's like, okay, great. You're putting more things on my plate. And I framed it up right away to her. And I was actually talking to the rest of our leadership team. I said, James Fisher does so much for us. We have this opportunity to do something for him. We are going to come through and we're going to get it right. And we're going to get it so right that the next thing we need something from him, when I ask him, he's going to do it. And I ask him for something all the time. I ping him, I say, I need this journal article. Can you send it to me? And he gets it to me right away. And I want him to want to do that because he, whether he's consciously thinking about it or not, he's like, man, Luke always comes through for me. And by the way, we're not keeping score here, right? We're not keeping score. I just feel better when I'm asking you of something. If I come through for you, I don't want to have a selfish relationship. I want to constantly be giving. I don't want the relationship to be even either. I'm not giving to you because I've received from you. I'm not, like I said, I'm not keeping score. It's not supposed to be even. I just want to make sure that I'm providing value for you also, because I know I'm going to turn and ask of something, of a colleague, of a friend, of a peer.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. No, that's awesome. So I wanted to shift gears and talk to you about something that I don't think you and I have ever really spoken about. And I want to learn more about Luke Carlson in terms of your own rituals and routines and diet and things like that. Every now and again, you'll be very vulnerable on a piece of content. I remember quite well. You were doing the Rec Focus episode and you mentioned you got your eyebrows waxed, which I thought was brilliant. And I really would love to see the audience's reaction in that moment. That would be fascinating. But I really enjoyed that. And I really appreciate your vulnerability in terms of trying to give, some intimate details about your lifestyle in order to give context to what you were saying. And with that, I wondered if we could talk about diet for a moment. This is something I'm constantly messing around with in my own life in terms of like meal timings and what to eat. I'm just really curious. Would you be willing to share like what your diet looks like on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I get incredible satisfaction and joy from things being ritualistic in my life, and then executing on things that are the intended ritual. So I'm going to talk about like this. My comments here won't be as much about macronutrients or micronutrients. They'll be more about how I approach the day and how I approach the week and what brings me joy. And ritual just brings me so much joy. So I'll make it really simple. I eat the same thing every single day within certain limitations or boundaries. And that's step number one. And I'll talk about what that means. The second element is that I am specific about when I'm going to have a good day in terms of nutrition or when I'm not going to have a good day. And I've never like shared this before ever, but it's literally in my journal every single day. So when the week starts, I pick how many days out of the week are going to be what I call good nutrition. Good nutrition to me, okay, and everyone can have a different definition of this. So I don't want to actually argue micronutrients and macronutrients. Good nutrition for me is when I'm going to eat all the things that I've decided to eat. So there's nothing that's sporadic or spontaneous. It's all intentional. So for me, it's I'm going to have some high protein oatmeal in the morning. I use a Kodiak product for my protein. So it's about 240, 250 calories of a high protein oatmeal in the morning that has 25 grams of protein. Okay. Later in the day, so that's one item I'm going to have. Later in the day, I'm going to have a bar with 20 grams of protein in it. It's either going to be a Quest bar or a Pure Protein bar. I have it sitting right next to me right now. So that's number two. In the day, at some point, I'm going to have a sandwich. I have a sandwich every day for lunch. If I don't have a sandwich for lunch, like the world comes to an end. Like I can be like across the world in a different country, and Heather will message me, my assistant, and say, "I'm so worried that you're not going to be able to find a sandwich in China today," right? And so I have to have a sandwich every day. Now, it's just a chicken or turkey sandwich every single day. I generally, when I'm at home in my normal routine, have the same sandwich every single day, same thing on it. I know what I'm going to have. Okay. I have a small dark skim mocha with no whip on it from my favorite coffee shop every single day. All right. I mean, it's the same coffee drink every single day. And
Would
then
you
I
have that at
have
what time?
it could be any time of the day. I always plan it and when I want to enjoy it. So like this morning I did a clarity break for an hour and I knew I wanted to sit by this fireplace and this leather chair with that mocha, and the coffee shop that I wanted to go to was, a short walk away from me, so I could grab it and come back and have it. If I know
Sorry
I'm
to
gonna,
interrupt you, Luke.
please do.
I just want to get the details of this. So with the breakfast, with the oatmeal, what time do you have that? And do you have that before a workout?
It totally depends on when I'm waking up. So I may wake up at I woke up at yesterday. It was 4:20 in the morning because I knew I was going to do a treadmill
Oh,
interval workout, and I woke up at 4:20, and I had that oatmeal in my system by 4:28. Like I had it right away. So I'll generally do it before a workout. But there'll be other times where I sleep in more, and I will get up at 6:45, and I'll have it at 6:45. So it's the timing of it changes. For me, I get a feeling of satisfaction when I eat all the things that I said I'm going to eat, and I don't care when I eat them. And if I've ate them, then I'm done eating, like for the day, right? So I may have that oatmeal and that bar right away and a mocha right away. Well, I know I'm running out of things that I get to eat the rest of the day. I'm going to have a sandwich. Then the other thing that I have is I have some type of higher protein drink every day. So it could be a muscle milk, which is about 160 calories with 25 grams of protein or 20 grams of protein, depending on the product. I have a membership at a big health club chain here that has a wonderful cafe that makes unbelievable smoothies, and I'll get a smoothie from there once out of the week. So some type of protein drink every day. And the last thing I have is dinner. And 90% of my dinners will be a meal service called Power Plate. And they're growing throughout a lot of the US, where you can select, the amount of protein, the amount of carbohydrate, the amount of calories. So these are generally 350 up to low 500 calories a day, high in protein. And one of the beauties for me is that there's so much variety in what I get. Like in my fridge right now, Heather orders them for me and just or buys them for me and puts them in my fridge. And she knows what I like to eat. So I'll have a couple salmon options in there. I may have one chicken. I may have, like a taco in there. I may have some type of steak option in there. But for me, having a calorically controlled dinner is the key to like body composition improvement. And then I'm done. Like I'm not going to have anything beyond that. Now I could have that high protein bar at 8 p.m. at night after I have that dinner. That's fine. But I'm not going to have anything beyond that. Those are the things that I'm going to have every single day. And that's my routine. But I will literally, that's what I call good nutrition. But I will
okay.
also pick days, Lawrence, where I'm not going to have good nutrition. So I wrote on Sunday, I wrote good nutrition, day 1 of 6 leading up to a Saturday bod pod. So that means I had perfect nutrition on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Today is Friday as we record this. Saturday, I know I'm going to go to Manny's Steakhouse tomorrow night. Manny's is the most expensive steak restaurant in all of Minnesota, and I'm bringing my leadership team and Heather and all of their significant others, and we're going to celebrate a massive business milestone that we wanted to celebrate in April, but COVID shut everything down, and so we're going to celebrate it. It is like the most meaningful dinner we've ever all been to together, and I'm going to consume like things that I normally wouldn't consume, right? And we're going to have dessert. But I need to, for me, mentally, I need to feel okay with that. I need to be planful around that.
Yeah.
So I know that Saturday, I'm going to eat whatever I want. Sunday, and by the way, Saturday will be a bod pod test in the morning. So I bod pod once per week. And I have what I'm calling good nutrition leading up to that. Then I'll bod pod. And then I plan when I'm not going to have what I'm calling good nutrition. So I have it all kind of mapped out. I know I'm going to go visit Jim Flanagan in Orlando next week. So we're recording this on a Friday. I will be with Jim Flanagan a week from now. I know I'm going to go to his steak restaurant, and I know I'm going to have a piece of carrot cake the size of my head. So I know what each day of nutrition needs to look like leading up to that. So like I said, none of that was really about micronutrients and
That was great.
macronutrients. It's about what brings me joy in my day, and I can't like be spontaneous. I mean, if tonight I'm going to go watch at 6:30 tonight, I'm going to watch my nephew play. He's in eighth grade, play football with my family. And when that football game's over, they're going to say, "Hey, do you guys want to come over to the house? We're going to have pizza and some ice cream and some brownies." And I'm going to say, "I can't," because I know that today is a day where I'm having good nutrition. I'm going to have a power plate dinner tonight that's about 400 calories. Because the next day, I'm going to have dessert and I'm going to have whatever. So that's what kind of brings
Yeah.
me joy, is I like that discipline. When I lead up to a marathon, I always have a stretch of days that I would call good nutrition. So leading up to the New York City Marathon 1 year ago, my big goal was 21 days or 22 days was last year of perfect nutrition. And if I have 22 days of what I call perfect nutrition, it always leads to my best bod pod in my life. And so I had the lowest body weight and best bod pod of my life going into that marathon. And people are like, "Wow, it's because you're running so much." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? It has nothing to do with my running. It has to do with my nutrition is really dialed in going into the marathon, because I want to be at my leanest when I actually toe the starting line of that marathon, because I don't want to carry extra fat as I run this marathon."
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for that. I really enjoy the detail, and it's funny, we're both very similar, but very different in terms of what the actual diet looks like, which I find fascinating.
Sure.
Do you ever do any? Do you ever do any fasting at all?
So that was the last piece that I was gonna
Yeah.
add, is once a month. So I have a 2020 goal of once a month I do a full day fast. And I
Mm.
really got this from Stuart Phillips, that there is some evidence to say that there's value to uh, from a broader health benefits to a full day fast. So this is not necessarily for body composition. This is for to stimulate a myriad of other health benefits. So it's my least favorite thing I've ever done in my life. I will not continue to do it in 2021, but I'm so stubborn that when I decide to do something, I'm going to 100% do it. And so I had my full fast day this week on a Tuesday. So Monday night I had dinner at 8 p.m. I stopped eating, and I didn't eat until the next day when I wake up. So I don't call it a 24-hour fast, because I don't want to eat, dinner at 8 p.m. and the next day I'm eating dinner at 8 p.m. It's a full, what I would consider a full day. So I always record the time. On that one, it was about a 33 or 34-hour fast, where I don't consume a single calorie. I'll drink water, and I'll drink diet soda. I'm really into diet soda, very pro diet soda. And I that fast is once per month. And Lawrence, I literally have to plan when that fast is going to happen. Like on my calendar, it literally says, "Don't add anything to my schedule." Heather knows she can't add like a lot of work on a days where I'm fasting, because I just don't do well with it. And it's not because I'm hungry or I'm malnourished, right? Like I'm not malnourished. It's just because I look forward to eating so much that when I don't have that, it just really impacts my day negatively. So as we record this now, it's the beginning of October. So I just finished my September fast. I just have October, November, and December, and then I don't think I'll carry it to 2021, but I haven't missed a month so far. And I experiment with bod pods before and after the fast, and so I do fast. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of do an intermittent fasting like every day too. Well, it's a strange one. I eat 2 meals a day, and I eat my first meal at like 10:30, 11, and then my second normally at, well, whenever my son decides to sleep. So it could be anywhere between sort of 6 and 8. But I'm starting to think I might change that, because I'm wondering if I perform better in terms of being more productive if I have breakfast. And so I'm intrigued. So who knows? I might experiment with something like that. I
Well,
also go ahead. Yeah.
one of the things the full day fast has done for me, and this sounds so silly, is it has brought me so much gratitude
Mm.
around getting to eat. Like we live in a country, we live in a country where like I've never gone hungry before, right? I mean, I've never lacked food, and a decent percentage of the world, people are literally going hungry. And so I'll write in my gratitude journal after a fast. It asks three things. What are you grateful for today? And I'll write down, "I am so grateful that I have access to food this morning and I get to eat this oatmeal." Like nothing, when the alarm goes off at 4:30, a guaranteed way to pop out of bed in the morning is to have it be the end of a fast and you get to wake up and eat something, right? Like I am ecstatic about jumping out of bed to be able to eat. So it's provided so much gratitude for having access to food and getting to eat.
Yeah, I agree. And I find there's a really good book called The Road by Cormac McCarthy, who wrote No Country for Old Men, and obviously that was turned into a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the most depressing and darkest book slash movie ever. It's got Viggo Mortensen as the lead protagonist. Have you seen this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I haven't. I
No.
haven't.
And I mentioned it to Owen recently. We were chatting, and I watched it, and I was blown away by the movie. I thought it was a great work of art, and I thought about it for so many days afterwards. And basically, it's in a nutshell, it's a post-apocalyptic world where it's just a man with his son trying to survive, and it's like, they're out in the freezing cold, the world's dying around them. There's no food. There's cannibals. It's pretty dark, and there's really very little positivity in the entire story.
Wow.
But what I found, and I'm now reading the book, and I'll read the book it's like my nighttime ritual. Like I'll read it for like 20 minutes before I sleep, and it just fosters so much gratitude for exactly the reasons you just said there. So that's a little recommendation from me, The Road. Check it out.
Well,
Go
Lawrence, let
ahead.
me frame up part of that eating for me is like I said, it's, and I've said it multiple times, it's not macronutrients, it's not micronutrients, it's not just things like striving for an optimal body composition, but I really believe in the concept of decision fatigue and avoiding decision
Mm,
fatigue. And so I know what I'm going to have for breakfast every single day. I know what I'm going to have for lunch every single day. I know, like, I don't ever have to think about it ever. And if you look at every area of my life, I have avoided choices and options, and I find my favorite thing and I find my routine, and I'm going to do that. And then I will take a step back and say, I'm going to change this. I mean, I had the same breakfast for 11 years in a row, and then I made the big decision to change the breakfast. But now there's no what's for breakfast this morning. Like, I know what's for breakfast this morning, right? I'm going to have the same thing repeatedly. And I do the same thing with clothing. I do the same thing with, shoes. I do the same. Like, I don't want anything superfluous. I don't want extra. I don't have multiple watches. I don't have multiple anything. Like, if you buy me a gift, I don't want it because I already have one of those, and my brain doesn't know what to do with having more than one of something. And to me, that brings so much peace and
mm.
freedom to think about the things that I really want to think about. Because I want to spend my time, daydreaming and contemplating and working on other things. And we've all heard about decision fatigue, right? We hear things that like Barack Obama had the same style of shirt, the exact same shirt and the same suit, but like 30 of them in his closet. So he wore the same thing every day, so he didn't have to think about it. And of course, we see the examples from Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs. If you wear a black turtleneck every day, you don't have to think about any of it. And I'm not that extreme that I'm wearing the same thing every day, but it's where I know the style of shirt or the pants or the so forth.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. That was actually really important that you shared that, because that underlines kind of why you do a lot of this stuff, to free up your mental capacity, to have more energy and focus for the more high impact things in your life, the things that you find more joy in, and the more important work you have to focus on. I used to be a Jedi master at that. And I've become really bad at it lately, I would say, especially after having a baby, because those guys just don't care about your schedule and mess everything up. So that it's now I'm trying to build in more routines, more predictability, more schedule, and we're certainly getting there. I actually took a tip from you today, and I did a late morning workout prior to this podcast. I'm not usually one to do that. I typically do my workouts. My routine at the moment is I go swimming with Arthur on a Sunday morning. I take him swimming, and then I get home. He's exhausted. I put him down for a nap, and there's a high likelihood I will have 1 hour, 20 minutes of undisturbed time where I can work out. And I'll do it at home, and I use bands, and I've got a chin up bar and dumbbells and yoga blocks and all the rest of it. Um,
Yeah.
but but as you know, I've just about to open a studio here in Galway, and we've got 6 Medex, big 5 and a lower back, and a hammer leg extension. we're about to get in a bunch of power block dumbbells and a bench, and going to have loads of cool stuff. It's really cool. And today I went in and I thought because I need practice myself in order to remind myself the settings for the different machines and the different nuances. So I haven't really used the machines in anger yet. So I was like, I'm going to do a full workout of failure. And that it was just a stark reminder of just how it feels, because I haven't really used those machines with that level of intensity since probably Rec, and probably Rec 2018 for that matter, because we were using Pendulum in 2019, weren't we? And then before that, Keys to Training in London, which is like 10 years ago, or just
Yeah.
under that, sorry, probably more like 6 or 7 years ago, actually, which closed down, unfortunately, because they just didn't make the business work in North London. And it was just, I always feel incredible after a workout, and I know you do too. And it actually strangely makes me kind of more productive, more inspired as I go into the afternoon. So I think I might start making that a little bit of a ritual somehow. I just feel like I have way more energy this afternoon than I would do otherwise. With all of that said, tell me about your workouts. How are you training at the moment, and where does it kind of fit in your schedule?
Yeah. So Lawrence, interesting observation there. I do not get ritualistic on the timing of my workouts, because when I get into a ritual, if I can't do the ritual, I freak out. And so I just know that like the ritual for me has to be, am I completing the workout? Not is the workout happen at a certain time? Because if something comes up and I can't do the workout at that time, it would throw me off mentally. Just like if I couldn't have oatmeal this morning for breakfast, I would be thrown off mentally. And so I want to make sure if I can't control it, or control it the vast majority of the time, I'm not going to commit to it. So I'm strength training about once every 4 days. Every once in a while, I'll just have 3 days in between a workout, but usually 4 days, sometimes as many as 5 days in between. I never pick the actual date. It's just 3 to 4 days, and generally when I feel recovered. So today is Friday as we record this. My last workout was Wednesday morning at 6:15 a.m. at our Northeast Minneapolis location. So I was the first client in that day. I'll always, like the day before, 2 days before, look at our mind body schedules and see where we have openings. And I'll just schedule myself with one of our trainers. And I try to rotate between all of our different locations and train at all of our different locations. It was one of the best workouts I've had in a long time. My workouts range from 25-ish minutes up to 45 minutes long. I try to schedule it for 30 minutes and actually force myself to complete in 30 minutes, but that's tough for me. A normal workout is 8 to maybe 15 exercises long. I did 11 exercises in this workout on Wednesday. It was a little bit of a shoulder trap emphasis. So I did a hammer seated shrug, immediately followed by a single arm dumbbell shoulder press, immediately followed by a Nautilus rear delt, immediately followed by a Nautilus Power Plus shoulder press, which is an old version of a Nautilus shoulder press that's plate loaded, that still has a great strength curve, immediately followed by a Medix lateral raise. And that was the shoulder sequence. All of the single joint movements were a 10-10 cadence. The multiple joint movements were a 2-4 cadence. Then I went from there and did a Nautilus 2ST pullover, Nautilus Nitro pec fly, and then I did a bicep sequence where it's a seated in an incline dumbbell hammer bicep curl, immediately followed by assisted chin-ups. And I needed a lot of assistance at that point because I'd already done pullover and I just did a brutal set of bicep curl. And then for legs, it was just 20 reps on a Medix leg press, immediately followed into the gluteator, and that was the entire workout. I believe that was 11 exercises. So that's my strength workouts. And man, I look forward to my strength workouts, and I'm as obsessed with my strength workouts as I've at any point in my life. Training high intensity training consistently since mid 1997. I just look forward to my workouts so incredibly much. And then from a cardio standpoint, so this is just probably where I upset all your listeners. I own a Stairmaster step mill, which is like the old fashioned Stairmaster where you're actually walking up the stairs. I have a tiny little office that I have that in there. I do that twice a week for 30 minutes on intervals. I do a long run once per week, which is between 10 and 20 miles. It's always 10 miles minimum. If I'm training for a marathon, it's up to 20 miles. Tomorrow I'm going to run 20 miles because it's a weekend of the Twin Cities Marathon, which is canceled. And I just thought it'd be fun to run 20 miles on the marathon course just because. So one long run per week. And I do 2 other runs during the week. One's an interval run. I did it yesterday morning at 5 a.m., where it's some type of sprint workout, always on a Woodway treadmill. And then I do one other run that's usually 7 miles, and there's different paces and things I'm trying to do in that run. So I do dedicated cardio 5 days out of the week, which is 3 runs and 2 step mills. And then I strength train once every 4 to 5 days. On that cardio, when I talk to high intensity training people, they think I'm nuts that I'm doing that much cardio. When I talk to my marathon running friends, they literally don't believe how little I run, because there's nobody that's really running marathons seriously that's only running 3 days out of the week, and that's all I really run. So
Yeah.
and I have not missed 5 days of cardio in years and years and years and years and years and years. So that's again part of the ritual of what makes me feel like I'm doing the things I want to do, is that I would just never ever miss a cardio session.
Yeah. Wow. It makes me think I don't do the most cardio I do at the moment. Obviously, strength training is quote unquote cardio. But I do walk the dog. That's it.
Yeah.
But I used to do a lot, and I miss moving more, I think. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
And I want to be clear that all these discussions that we're having later in this episode, for me, there's a combination of what do you think is purposeful, that's evidence-based, from nutrition, from exercise, from a self-care standpoint, what's purposeful and evidence-based and allows you to perform at your best. And then what are the things that, the rituals that you like to build into your life that get you excited. And so for me, I don't think someone needs to do cardio 5 days out of the week, but I know that I thrive off of it, and I have an addiction to it, and I enjoy it. And I get so much satisfaction from doing those 5 in exactly that way. So, but ultimately what I would wrap up by saying is I get joy and a feeling of accomplishment from doing the things that I've decided to do in my rituals. So I may change the ritual. We could record this 10 years from now, and I may say, hey, I changed my cardio ritual. It's 2 a week, but that's what I'm going to do, is 2 a week. I could never start a week saying, I wonder how much cardio I should do today, or this week. I need to kind of know what my week looks like always. And again, when all those things are in place, then I can focus creative effort toward all the other things I need to think about or want to think about.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Luke, really enjoyed doing this productivity part 2 with you. I feel like we've gone into some unknown territory. Definitely learned some new things about you that are just fascinating. And I think the productivity nerds in the audience are going to really enjoy this one. So I really appreciate you coming on. What's the best way if you want to find out more about you? What are the most important projects to you right now?
Yeah, so someone can always email me, luke@discoverstrength.com. And I would encourage people to look at one of 2 websites. So we have discoverstrength.com as Discover Strength's website, but we also have discoverstrengthfranchise.com, which is a completely different website that walks someone through our entire franchise offering. And it's worth taking a peek at. I think the website is a really well-built website. So that's really what we're working on right now, is that franchise. And I would encourage anyone to take a peek at that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll also link all those up in the show notes for people who forget that or need to look at the blog post to get reference. And to find said blog post for this episode and download free resources to help you grow your high-intensity training business, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 292. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.